Storm Cindy was the first tropical cyclone to make landfall in Louisiana since Hurricane Isaac back in 2012. But although Cindy was not a hurricane, nobody really noticed at the time, and certainly no one cared. Hi, I'm Chris May, writer, producer, and host of This Day in Weather History, a podcast now in its second year from the Weather Network in Canada. On the June 5th episode of this podcast, I presented to you a story about a tropical storm that never reached hurricane status yet still had its name retired. Today is a storm that struck a similar note when it tuned up the Pelican State this day in weather history. It may not have been a hurricane, but it was deadly, and its aftermath was felt for days prior to and after actual landfall. Hurricanes are horrible because, unlike tornadoes that we've been talking about over the past couple of days, which cause very precise paths of destruction, these monsters span whole regions. An area of low pressure began to organize from a tropical disturbance on June 16th of 2017 in the western Caribbean Sea near the coast of Nicaragua and Honduras. On that day, Jamaica's Meteorological Service issued a nationwide flash flood watch for low-lying and flood-prone areas. Now, it was only just evolving, but the area of low pressure that it was dropped heavy rainfall across the Yucatan Peninsula, Central America, the Cayman Islands, western Cuba, and Florida. It continued to move northwest towards the Yucatan Peninsula and Mexico throughout the weekend and into Monday, June 19th. But again, even though it would not make landfall in the United States for 3 more days, we all know that with tropical storms, that doesn't matter. The outer bands normally do the worst of the damage anyway. If they were a boxer, outer bands would be the flurry of body blows that precede the knockout punch. Flooding and power outages were already reported early Wednesday, almost a full day before the storm was forecast to make landfall. A tropical storm warning was in effect from San Luis Pass, Texas, to the mouth of the Mississippi River. Welcome to year 2 of this podcast. Right now, you're listening to the full version of today's story on your favorite podcast provider. But there's also the daily podcast video short. They're shot right here in my podcast recording studio, so you get that perspective. But oftentimes, they will include visuals from that day's event, from when it happened, in weather history. So after listening to the full story, go check out the podcast video short on television or online anytime at theweathernetwork.com/weather history. The center of Tropical Storm Cindy made landfall between Cameron, Louisiana and Port Arthur, Texas in the early morning hours of June 22nd. Tropical storm force winds extended up to 115 kilometers from the center of the actual spin. As Cindy continued to grind along the Texas and Louisiana border, it brought heavy rain that covered the northern Gulf Coast. Cindy would finally make landfall in the United States, in Louisiana, with a grand entrance. Peak storm surge up and over a meter, and tides closer to 2 meters above normal in Vermilion Parish. Coastal flooding and storm surge caused roads across southern Alabama and northwest Florida to close during Tropical Storm Cindy. Like I said, the outer bands are the roundhouse you never see coming because everyone is fixated on the center or the eye. Cindy brought heavy rain totals well to the east of its center, with general amounts of 180 to 250 millimeters of rain falling over southeastern Mississippi, southwestern Alabama, and the far western Florida Panhandle, including a peak total of 475 millimeters. That's almost 50 centimeters of rain near Ocean Springs, Mississippi. In all, 2 deaths were reported directly related to Cindy. Louisiana Governor John Bell Edwards declared a state of emergency after a 10-year-old boy died in Alabama, while in that state, their governor, Kay Ivey, also declared a statewide emergency, citing National Weather Service forecasts for significant flash flooding throughout the state. The big PS to close this story, postscript, the remnants of that system would also spawn 18 tornadoes. I could have done an entire episode just on that. All of them EF0 or EF1, with 6 in Alabama, 3 in West Virginia, 2 each in Florida, Kentucky, Mississippi, New Jersey, and 1 in Pennsylvania. What a far-reaching disaster this day in weather history. Tomorrow is June the 17th. and we get back to another entry on another top 10 list. This one is the third most impactful tornado in Canadian history. I am going to tell you the story of the Windsor tornado, and it still holds that number 3 spot even after over 70 years because of why and how it is remembered. That's tomorrow on This Day in Weather History with me, your host, Chris May.